I hit the wrong button, chat. Ignore that. Also, hello, we're here. Welcome to the stream.
Hello.
Hello.
If you're unfamiliar, chat, it's Thursday, which means it's Real Good Stream Day, which means I'm live in the places where you normally watch me, but also twitch.tv/realgoodai is currently live, and I'm here joined by Mandy and Emen from Real Good AI, as well as a special guest who I will let them introduce to you, and we're going to have what should be some fun games and a really interesting discussion today. But Emen, were you going to do the intro?
Yeah, sure. So hello everyone. We are joined by Professor Yaniv Brent Vane. So he is an associate professor of plant and microbial biology at the University of Minnesota, working in theoretical and empirical population genomics. So hello to you, Yaniv.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to chat and play some games.
Yeah, very cool to have you with us. So Yaniv, can we start by you talking about like a brief overview of what you do and your research at the university?
Yeah, so I'm interested in how we see the vast diversity of plants and animals, mainly plants and microbes, but of life that we see in this earth, and what the major forces are that shape their evolution. And I use mathematical tools to try to figure that out. And a big thing that we use is try to use genomic sequence to try to learn from the genomes the history and major forces influencing organisms in this world. And when I got to the University of Minnesota, I got a teaching assignment to teach statistics, which is deeply related to these questions, right? Because in statistics, you have some data and try to figure out what happened, or try to tell some stories about that. And it's the same sort of challenges we have with sequence data, and teaching stats has been a large, figuring out how to teach statistics well has been a ongoing challenge. You know, you might have heard or had from your experience either really enjoying or not enjoying, or mixed experiences with teaching statistics, but it's usually a thing people remember. And I've been trying to work hard to figure out ways to make it fun and help people learn these what I think are really important and interesting concepts. And so I've been playing around recently with how to use our new AI tools through LLMs to try to teach this stuff.
So your effort of teaching would be in biostatistics, right?
Yep.
So, silly question.
Whoa. Before we go any further, let's start the games.
Let's
games.
get games going.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
And maybe your background in statistics would help the game. I don't know. Okay.
All right.
Okay. I'm gonna be severely outclassed, just so everyone in chat knows.
I've been practicing.
I haven't played Tetris in probably a year and a half. I'm sure it'll be fine.
So what were you
So
asking?
keep going, Amen.
So first question, what's the difference between biostatistics and statistics as like the classic class that we take in undergrad?
There's not really much of a difference. It's like, you know, what's the difference between what is it, Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man? Well, Miss Pac-Man has a bow on her head, you know. And, you know, biostatistics is the same in that it's, you know, in that it's you know, statistics as applied to specific biological problems, but you know, statistics is statistics.
Yeah.
Many important statistical breakthroughs have happened in biology, but there's nothing particularly unique about biostatistics as much as it's nice that we can have this framework where the story problems all make sense to students and have something to do with their academic interests.
Oh, why is it so fast?
It's really going fast. I am in trouble.
Oh.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I would just add too that the data is pretty interesting in biology, right? That's what makes biostatistics so interesting. There's like all these problems because I'm dead. Life forms only live so long, things only live so long, and there are things that you want to study that are impacted by that. Like there's censored data, there's all sorts of things. There's all sorts of confounding factors, right? Things that we don't normally think of, and you want to know correlation. You don't want to know correlation, you want to know causation, and so all of that makes it really fun in statistics, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, well, and so trying to teach this stuff is there's lots of fantastically interesting and exciting problems in biological statistics. But most of what you cover in an introductory course is the standard sort of course stuff you would learn in lots of places. Biology, opens up lots of interesting gates, and the biology is very diverse. Some people do clean experimental studies in really well-designed scenarios, in which case the stats aren't as interesting. And other people try to learn complicated things from natural, processes or natural variation, or they do kind of these ugly experiments in the complicated world, and it can lead to quite challenging biological or statistical problems that are all quite fun. So anyways, I really enjoy the challenges of figuring out statistics for biological problems and of trying to teach students the joys of such endeavors.
I see. So, talking about teaching, so I understood that you developed an AI tool for teaching, for helping you teaching this class of biostatistics. Can you talk to us more about what are these new tools that you are incorporating into your teaching, and how does it work, and how does it work, and what's the goal of it?
Yeah, so I've been developing a whole bunch of different approaches or efforts to try to make the most of our changing oh no, game's not going well for me this time. Of our
Don't look at mine.
of our changing technological situation we have here with these LLMs that seem like they will likely change a lot of how we teach and learn. And I've been trying to think about how I can be ready to make the most of that, both for me to teach well and for students to get the most out of their learning. And so I've tried a few different things, and we'll see how they all work. So for years I've been developing my own textbook for the class, and something I did a couple years ago is I had students try to use my book to develop a chapter of my book or some section of my book to try to develop a tutor for themselves. And that was one of numerous opportunities I gave students to study for the midterm, and there was, I allowed them to have a discussion about that, and of all the different ways that I gave students to prepare for the midterm. the students who did that seemed the most interested and engaged by that, by the sort of specific opportunity that I gave them, and so they were really into it, and it was really interesting. And so, as I've been updating my text recently, I decided that I was going to try to see different ways I could incorporate AI, and it's quite good and quite fun. And so, what I've been working on recently is developing different bots to integrate with my book in different ways. So one thing I've been working on is each chapter will have a custom GPT sort of thing that's a specialized chatbot for the content in hand. So the idea is I can still, instead of saying, "Hey, go interact with this random bot and good luck, kids," you can give them some guidance about. I can provide the bot some guidance about, this is where I'm coming from. These are the key learning goals for the chapter, and so interact with the students to help them with this. Here I taught this information in a somewhat non-standard order for these pedagogical reasons. So know that when you're helping these students, that they're going to be coming from this place with these goals in mind. And so that's one thing I've been working on that's been quite fun, and we'll see how it works as I unleash it on my students next semester.
So
I've also been exploring a few other things. So for example, another thing I've been working on and have nearly finished is to have short answer essay questions with instant feedback. And again, still, instead of saying to the students, check your answer via a bot or whatever, I can work with that bot beforehand to tell the bot the sort of answers I'm looking for, given my standards and expectations, what I think would be good answers and sort of the things that are most important for the students to learn. And so I've been trying to develop bots that have those sorts of skills that I think are quite fun. We'll see what happens in the future. You could imagine a not so distant world where who needs any of my sort of specialized guidance. You could imagine a world where the bot was smart enough to read my chapter and chat to me a little bit and get to know what I like and what's important to me. But it seems to not quite be there yet in my experience. But that would be a world I'd have a lot of fun with.
Can we back up just for a second? I think most of the audience knows way less about AI and building bots and things like that than you do. Can you explain a little bit about what goes into the process of starting to build one? You mentioned
this
like a
isn't
GPT.
Really doing anything particularly fancy. I'm not using advanced tools or anything, right? I'm just going to ChatGPT or Gemini or whichever one of these standard LLMs that we've kind of dealt with and know. And what I do is I say, for example, to make these sort of tutor bots, I'll say, here's my chapter. Let's work together to create a document that summarizes this chapter in a way that a bot could be helpful, could be a helpful tutor. And so I work together with ChatGPT or whichever LLM I'm, working with that day to develop like a set high level summary of this thing, of the chapter, so that the bot doesn't have to keep, so much in its mind at once. And then I say, here are my goals, and I kind of, and so that's kind of, and I upload that to one of these things as a knowledge base. So I have a little sort of simple document that explains that. It also explains my figures. So if the students, I could upload the figures, but that would kind of waste a lot of resources or whatever. So instead I kind of just describe, here are these figures. So if the students ask a question about this, here's the appropriate context that I'm talking about. And so once I get a good summary of the content, I then work kind of iteratively with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whichever one I'm using to develop a nice prompt that, if you've worked with these things, sometimes they just talk too much at you, and they don't stop, or they give the students too many answers, they're too wordy too quickly. Or sometimes I've tried to do, sometimes when you work with it, you say don't give the students the answers, and then all of a sudden it will never tell the students the answer, and it's super frustrating. So I kind of work with it for a bit to help customize that prompt so that it will help the students appropriately, or as I deem appropriate. and then once I feel good about that, I'm messing with different ways to do this, so I haven't solved it yet, but finding a way to make that bot accessible to the students. So right now I just have a link to a custom GPT as I'm doing it now, and I give the students that link, which means that they can use it for free for a short while until they run out of their free use, and then it kind of compels them to either stop, which is okay, hopefully they got enough at that time, or to pay for a subscription. I'm not sure sort of right now how many students do subscribe to these LLMs in college. My guess is probably many of them do, but I don't know.
So just to be clear, so you are providing this chat bots customed to your what you want to teach. So does it mean that you don't need any TA anymore? These AI is replacing the teaching assistants that most professors have when they teach?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know. I mean, I have a TA this year, and we'll see what we can pawn off to AI in the future. I am hoping that at least, right, what it means at minimum is that the TA and I have more time to help the students with more complicated things, and that some of the rote sort of questions that we both answer, that me and the TA might answer a bunch of times, maybe we don't have to answer it as often. TAs also, are helpful for grading. For both helping students and for grading. And I'm interested to see, how much grading can be put in the hands of AI. I'm a little skeptical right now of handing students grades to a bot, because students care about their grades, and you would like a human eye on it. So what I'm trying this year is, as I said, with some of these essay questions, I don't know, with some of these essay questions, giving the students the feedback from the bot and allowing them, and instead of turning that into a grade, just turning into feedback. Ideally, I would like it to turn it into a grade and allow students to contest that grade, right? Hopefully that might also help them learn that bots aren't always right, So it could say, here's the student's answer. I give the bot some guidelines, and then gives the student back a little instantaneous feedback about how their answer was, what they did well, what they didn't do well. You can imagine that turning that into a grade. Another challenge with bots and teaching, right, is I think once you have it grade, then maybe it's higher stakes, and all of a sudden, instead of the students answering, maybe this happens already, but instead of the students answering the question, the student has their bot answer the question, and so
That was the question. Is like, you are using bots to help the student, but what's your take on like what everyone talks about is like student using AI to interact with your bot? It's like your bot is correcting students' bots for their homework. So are we learning anything, or it's like a fight of bots basically?
So we have a freshman orientation here coming this week. And
are they allowed to use it first? Are they allowed to use ChatGPT to do your ChatGPT homework or anything?
Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like we're all figuring this stuff out. Right now, my view is that, students should be grown-ups, and that it depends on the assignment and the learning goals. What I have in my current AI policy is that I have a statement like, nobody will hire you to not use AI to solve simple problems, and no one will hire you if all you're doing is asking a bot for what the answer is. So I'm trying to figure out how to tell students that they're grown-ups, they're responsible for their education, and there are fantastic ways in which they can use this cool technology to really learn a lot. And there are also ways in which they can use this technology to skip learning, right? So to some extent, I just think we kind of need to treat students like adults and put that, in their hands, while providing them with some guidance and information about what we think would help them and what wouldn't. So, sorry, this game's getting a little intense here.
Oh, you got me.
But the thing is, like, you cannot control, like, how do you know if the students are really learning or cheating their way through? Like, I'm guessing it's an honor code or something, but you cannot kind of prevent this like cheating examples, right? Where they're just like,
there's a lot of things about that I've thought a lot about, and I'm still trying to figure out. I mean, what I'm trying to do is have more pen and paper interaction in class, and more sort of computers down interaction in class, so that it's kind of an honor code, but make all that stuff practice and low stakes. So then when they get into the classroom, that's when we can do more evaluation and putting their understanding to work and putting it out there. So that was why I'm a little bit wary of having bots grade some of that stuff, especially with work that can be done in on the computer at your free time. It just seems that there are ways you could guard for it. There was that fun paper that just came out. What was the word? Delve. I think delve is like strongly. Delve is a word of a bot. And if you see that word, that might there's all these AI checkers you could try, but obviously that's just a arms race. And there are these humanizing bots. You can put your GPT. You can put your essays through to make it sound like a person wrote it. So I don't think that that getting into deep into a deep race with the students, in an antagonistic relationship with the students over AI use, isn't, to me, I don't see that as a good way forward. And I think, some other ways of figuring out if the students actually learned anything seems to be, to me, the only reasonable way to deal with this, or just not care if they've learned anything. But that seems like not a good idea.
So how is the, I would say, how do you see the future of teaching, but also like learning with these tools developing so quickly and so drastically? Like, would you say, for example, like things like, for example, you're teaching in biology, biostatistics. Would you say like students in the future would have to like know these tools, know how to run a machine learning models and do all these things as like a prerequisite now for the future of any field? Would you say like it's going to kind of embrace these AI tools, and we would have to kind of know how to do it, not just like a bot responding to a bot, but understanding it more deeply?
Understanding what?
Understanding like these tools more deeply and kind of be able
mean,
to.
I don't know. It seems like that's only relevant to the extent that it like, I don't know if you need to know these tools more deeply to get much out of them. Like, it seems like lots of what you need to get, at least from my experience, to get things out of these bots is, a strong bullshit detector, because these bots are often bullshitters, right? So having some subject area expertise, knowing, in my case, enough statistics to like do stuff is pretty important, at least from my experience. I've always gotten more out of these things when I know what I'm talking about than when I don't, So here I'm just gonna let these pieces fall. It's hard to think and play, or at least I'm not gonna play hard. But so I give the example of, I'm really good at coding in this language R, and whenever I use a bot to help me, it is great, and I can do all sorts of things. If it doesn't get me all the way there, I can fix it. If it's wrong and full of shit and lying to me, I can figure that out because I know what I'm doing. I had a JavaScript problem in trying to implement some of these bots I hope to do, and it required me coding in JavaScript, which I know nothing about. And so in that case, right, if it happens to get it right in the first time, good for you and you're set. But if you're stuck, you're stuck, and so my sense is that it's still quite important to know what you're talking about, to get the most out of these. I mean, maybe these bots, they'll likely get better in the future, but at least where we're at right now, it's a very much trust but verify, or maybe don't even trust, in that it's a good starting place. But
Right.
but having
So with that,
subject-specific knowledge is really important.
along those lines, how do you trust it if you're planning on using it in your classroom? How do you trust it enough to not tell your class inaccurate information?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been.
Okay.
I mean, right? Lots of this. I mean, that's part of the reason. I mean, not inaccurate. There's so much stats out there that I'm not as worried. It's not particularly esoteric, but people might have different views about the right or wrong things to do. And so that's part of why I've been working with these with my own bots that I've been spending a little bit of time customizing, just so I have a better sense of how they do. I mean, to me, and maybe this is unfair to students, but I try to be a better teacher every year and try new things every year. And sometimes that means experimenting. Students are human subjects that whether they know it or not, have often signed up for or signed on to my course, where part of it is me figuring out how to teach them better. And sometimes those experiments work remarkably well, and suddenly I'm a better teacher and the students have a better experience for it, and sometimes sometimes it doesn't. And I feel guilty when the teaching didn't go as well as I thought. I was going to try some new innovative teaching thing, and it just didn't work. And I think that students in this era are actually remarkably understanding and patient of that. If you're giving them a good faith effort. I am trying to develop different approaches where like students can rate the bot and provide feedback on that. So I'm trying to get those sorts of things online as I go. But I don't trust them to be perfect. I mean, that said, I don't trust, me to be right all the time. I don't trust TAs to be right all the time. Like it's similar thing with what do you call it? With driverless cars, where we seem to be really nervous about driverless cars making mistakes, and maybe for a good reason. But of course, driver cars aren't particularly safe themselves, So sometimes, I understand that these things will be wrong and might not do what I want, and I understand that I'm not always right and might not always do what I want, let alone my, TAs or other ways they can get information online or something, so yeah.
You have a critical eye for like finding the truth, and you have a strong foundation, like scientific foundation. These bots not only give you BS, but they are confident in their way of giving you BS. That's the big difference. Like they don't question themselves. They don't say maybe it's not that, maybe it's like this is it and I'm sure of it. And they give you every like fake references or things like that. This is what scares me personally. It's
that's what I was saying. It's an experiment. I mean, and I have tested these things out to some extent, and I walk around, my wife doesn't know anything about statistics, and I have her try them out and see her experience. But obviously I can't simulate a world of the experience of all the students, and so we'll see what it says. I am trying to get more feedback from the students on how these bots work. My sense is right now they work better than I would expect, and better than I have any reason to expect. I mean, I've been quite impressed. So my wife doesn't know anything about stats, and I had her sit down, and read my chapter and interact with the bot. And this one was aimed to help you work through the learning goals. And so if you read the chapter, it said, here are the learning goals. Which one did you understand? If you said you understood it, it gave you a quick question to validate your understanding. If you said it didn't, help you work through it. And she found it to be quite helpful, and not to say wrong things that often. I mean,
I see some benefit, absolutely. Like I just like immediately think about like, different kind of student with like diverse like with diverse learning needs. Like some students are like slow, have like a slower pace learning, and these bots can help them like, I don't know, extract more from the books or from the homework that they are doing or something. So I can see kind of like a personalization for each student, that physically the professor or the TA don't have the bandwidth to adapt for every type of student, right?
Yeah, or the patience. Like, I think of myself as quite a patient person. But, you have a room of 70 students or emailing you, or let's say I try Slack one year. That was an experiment I didn't like. these different ways to try to to help students, and I just can't scale helping my class of 70, 80, 100 students. I can't think of a better way to scale that help. I mean, you could imagine you could rely on, I mean, another thing that people do, which is nice, is to have the students help each other,
Mhm.
And when they do that, again, there's going to be lots and lots of wrong answers. um,
Yeah.
so it's hard to think about, there's obvious benefits that you miss from a bot, and that, for example, they might, gain, solidarity or understanding that they can be wrong. There's different ways to think about the cost and benefits of different approaches, I guess.
Like,
But what's that?
yeah, so I was going to say it's like vibe coding. Like we always hear this like AI is going to replace the software engineer and they are going to take over the jobs. But then you hear people tune it down to vibe coding. Like they would give you structure, but you have to have the foundation and the basic knowledge, and then it will help you to be more efficient in your work and learning, but not eliminate you. So I guess on this kind of example, like would you see, like let's say you have like a potential like AI bot that is going to be so good that is going to be right and tested, testing and everything. Would you see it as like an effect? Is it going to affect like the job displacement that we hear, but in the academic institution themselves? Like, do we need a TA or a professor anymore if we have so much like knowledge and all these tools available to us? Like,
No, I've been thinking hard about that. Obviously, my livelihood depends on it, and I think that, as you said earlier, right, do I need a TA anymore? I'm not sure. I'm gonna try one for now, but who knows? Do we need me anymore? I think so, but I don't know how many of me. Like, I'm wondering, when I was about 10 years ago or something, as the internet became a thing and Zoom or whatever, web videos became a thing, right? We had all these this idea of these massively, what do they call them, these MOOCs, these whatever it was called, but these online classes that were going to teach thousands of people, and they failed for numerous reasons. I think one was because they couldn't keep engagement or whatever. But I do wonder if there's a way to teach larger classes, hit more students with more personalized learning, which might not come to fully replace faculty, but it might come to increase their efficiency and decrease the number that we need. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Oh, and I can't hear you now. I don't know if this one is too loud here.
no, I can hear you.
What's that?
Yes, so I think it will never replace the professor just because of the human interaction. I don't think like the professor is just the person who is giving you the knowledge. I think it's the whole thing, a bunch of things that you can get from your professor, like encouragement, empathy, talking about like the career, the future that is more personalized and more human, kind of like there's a whole social aspect that it would be weird or creepy if like a robot is going to give you like these kind of advice. So that
I can't tell about that. Part of me totally agrees with you and thinks you're right. And part of me thinks, a problem with people is that they're judgmental, they have limited bandwidth, they have ego and all these issues that that these bots seem to not have. I mean, the bots have their own issues. Like it seems like they're little what do you call it, sycophants or whatever, and who knows how long that will last. Like um, but but part of me totally agrees with you and thinks you're fully right, and part of me wonders about what is that essential human thing. Do you want and there's also want versus, I guess, what's good for you. But do you want to interact with a teacher that's going to be impatient and frustrated, or do you want to interact with this bot that has infinite patience and can explore lots of your different directions? And I don't know, I think it's probably better for our developing brains,
so.
to interact with a real person.
Yeah,
But I
that's
don't know if that's preferable for people.
What I worry about with all of this is the collapse of the economic university in the way that it is now, right? So with how expensive it is to go get a college education, to be in one of these classes, it sort of demands that there is a certain amount of human and one-on-one attention from a human from that standpoint, right? Because if you could just make a bot to do similar type things, then you could learn in a classroom, because the classroom is just also using a bot. I feel like the competition would be that no one would go to university anymore. Those are the sort of things I worry about.
And I can't tell if that's for good or bad. Like part of me is like, everything you said makes a lot of sense. Another part of me is like, oh, well, colleges are massively unaffordable, right? That's what you were talking about in the beginning. If there's a way to increase people's educational opportunities and their educational, outcomes and experience, and provide them a great education. Like, I think we're not here yet, but I mean, right now I take my paychecks and put a lot of them away for my kids' college, right? And then we don't have much money left. And if there was a way where they could get the same education without that bill, wouldn't that be awesome? I mean, I guess I wouldn't be able to pay it because I'd be out of a job. I'd need to figure out something else to do, I guess. But part of me is like, this American education system, broad liberal arts education where you go out to college and learn stuff, is awesome, and it was clearly probably formative for all of us. And it's out of reach. It's financially out of reach. It's very expensive. It takes, if there are other ways to get some of these things, that would be fantastic. And obviously that's been, a long experiment that, often unsavory institutions online might run, but they're tapping onto something, when you see this, whatever, I forget the names of these different online, schools, but when you,
the for-profit,
but right there, what's that?
The for-profit ones?
Yeah. But often what they're tapping into is college is expensive, not everyone has the opportunity to leave their families, live in this sort of lifestyle or whatever. And if there's some other less costly path towards gaining this knowledge and experience, I mean, part of me is like, oh man, that sucks that might, that these fantastic institutions we've developed might not all survive. And part of me is like, wow, we can achieve that mission of educating people more effectively, more efficiently, more broadly. Like, that's kind of cool. I mean, I don't know, I mean, maybe we're all attached to this idea of college because
it's good, but think it will decrease the price of college if we don't need, it's like it's like in a company, you don't need to hire that many engineers because AI is going to help each engineer be so efficient and so more productive that you need less headcounts.
Yeah.
I would think it would
Just being honest, I don't think college is expensive because professors make exorbitant salaries. Let's be real here, where the money is going. So I'm not sure that it would actually come down very much.
I mean, another place where the money is going though is like, keeping the lights on.
Right.
If there are fewer lights to keep on, I mean, part of it maybe you're getting to is like, Oh shoot, I am not playing well. It's hard to talk and play.
It is. It's a challenge here. We appreciate you taking the challenge.
But there's all the we live in these large. I live in this large campus that has all this infrastructure it needs to maintain. It has to recruit students to come here and to spend time here. And again, maybe that's awesome. Like you grow, you learn, you develop as a student. It's fantastic time of your life. At least it was for me.
But
But
there are irreplaceable. Like I
what's that?
understand. I was saying like there are stuff that are irreplaceable. Like you work in biology. How can you do an AI bot if you need to learn like the experimental part of the teaching? Like doing experiments need human and stuff to do experiment. You cannot like order it or learn it through a bot, right?
I think we're getting to find some of those answers out soon. Like partially, yes. I missed this talk, but my colleagues went, where there was a guy who programmed a bot to tell him what his next decision in the what the next experimental step should be in his path, and then the bot pipetted for him and put out whatever next sort of logical experiment would be. And that depends obviously a lot on the mechanics of what kind of experiments you're doing, what you're trying to do, etc. But there's some things that seems like you'll probably need people for a long time, and that a combination of bot and robot or whatever won't take away from us. And there's some things that will be lost more quick, that can be lost more quick, replaced more quickly.
Yeah, there is like some creativity that like doing new research, because these bots eventually like get trained from the data that we give it. So new data, new ideas, new proposal, research, and they cannot like train on it because it doesn't exist yet. So this creativity part is kind of what hangs into the human part.
I hope so. I mean, we're really coming into a place. I think it's hard to understand or predict. Like everything you're saying now, I want to say yes. And from my experience, my somewhat modest experience with bots so far, I would say that you're right. And we probably, if you've interacted with these things enough, or the audience has interacted with these things enough, we kind of know the ways they're weird, the ways they kind of give average answers, the ways they want to make us happy, the ways they're conservative in their responses or whatever. I don't know what the future holds in terms of where they're going. I have, some views, but it's hard for me to make strong bets on what's uniquely human. I mean, even when another question that I think about is like, okay, so what? Not just do I worry about students cheating, or what do I teach, but like, what do people need to know in this world? To what extent will their jobs be replaced, or where are the jobs, and where is the knowledge? Quite important, and it's difficult. I mean, it's kind of fun to live in this time, kind of scary too, to live in this time where we don't know the answers to those questions.
Yeah,
Right. Kind of along those lines, is there any practical advice you give your students when you put the chatbot in their hands?
No, I give them practical advice when they have a naive chatbot, when they have one that I haven't. So if I was to tell a student who wasn't in my class, I'm developing this material for this that I'm teaching for our freshman orientation this weekend, where I'm giving guidance to incoming freshmen about how to use how to use chatbots well to help them in their career here. And I have very specific views about what I think they should do in that case, because I think, we want to figure out, they want to use or I want them to use these chatbots to better understand things rather than to skip understanding things. And there's all sorts of ways that you can do that, like ask the bot to quiz you, or, tell the bot this is what I need to know and help me get it, or whatever. There's all sorts of guidance I can give for that. But and I think it's important to know, like, okay, some key guidance is that these things are bullshitters, that they don't know the answers. There's all sorts of things, you shouldn't trust them. There's all sorts of guidance I can tell a student about, what I would, hope they learn about using a bot today. Like, it is just so hard because it is all about today. And with, things changing quickly, I can't pretend that I can give them guidance that would be useful in, a month or probably a month, but, probably not in 5 or 10 years, it's all moving rapidly, and it makes for exciting times, let's say.
Yeah, and what you were saying before, like the drawback of that is like, beside the bias that can be baked into these bots and models, the other thing is like the fact that they never contradict, or they kind of like, treat you well, is always patient, is something that we talked recently with a neuroscientist that was talking about that for human. What's the effect of like having a chatbot or whatever LLM you have that always agrees with you, go into your sense, and kind of like treat you always nicely, kind of like do something on your brain. Like, you need contradiction. This is how you interact and learn.
Yeah, totally. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that's how you learn to be a person.
Yeah.
Right. Is by, rough interactions. I watched that. I think you recommended I watched that Twitch, and I thought she made lots of interesting points. And I think that's all great. I mean, the bot will tell the students that they're wrong. But yeah, it is very complimentary. So it gives them maybe a good, oh, you're almost there, good start, or I understand this is challenging, instead of saying, I work on my bots to tell them not to just give the students the answers. And if they ask enough, it almost gets them there. And instead of saying, oh, you lazy piece of garbage, you should have thought before you talked to me, it says, I understand this is challenging, and there's a lot, and it's more understanding. Whether it should be or not, I don't I don't know. I do worry deeply about, people in the future that don't know how to deal with people, because they do, interact with these bots that are made to keep them engaged and happy. Like, that's a huge societal concern that I think is legit, and that we should really take pretty seriously. But I don't know exactly how that interacts. Maybe that's just me being like, don't blame me sort of thing, But I don't know exactly how that interacts with the specific, Isn't it great to have a teacher that, allows you to, gives you the benefit of the doubt, let's say, allows you to ask, we were talking about the benefit of a teacher is that they're there and they're a person. I mean, a benefit of these bots is that they're not a person. You can be maybe more open, especially if you don't feel judged, if you don't think your professor will look at these things and judge you harshly. You can ask these bots all sorts of dumb questions, and you're not thinking, oh man, this thing's gonna think I'm an idiot. You're just gonna say, this computer has the patience to help me. And I'm not sure if that's a good way to live the world. Like, when you interact with people, it's good for them to to know that maybe you should be held accountable for knowing things and stuff, but I mean, it's kind of a nice quality in a teacher.
Do you ever worry with your bot specifically? So technically, these bots have context windows, right? So if someone has like the paid account, they can talk to it forever and it will resort essentially back to regular ChatGPT. Do you worry about that?
What do you mean? So I've messed with them a little bit, and like I try to get it off topic,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't gotten it to get off topic. In fact, sometimes I accidentally load up one of my bots instead of GPT, and I ask it, instead of whatever I'm trying to do with, and I ask it something, and it says, "Oh, I shouldn't. This isn't the place for you." And so they can always just. I mean, if I was a student, I'd probably just more happily return to my standard whatever bot environment. Then my preferred LLM. Then figure out how to bend my professor's LLM to do what I want it to do, Does that make sense?
That's one perspective, but then the other more nefarious student perspective is that wouldn't it be funny if I got the approved bot to say this?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll find out. That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm quite excited to give this a shot with my 70 students or 80 students or whatever next semester. And, if I can get more people to use my book, I mean, I'm hoping to get feedback in that where to allow for people to give feedback on the AI because, I can only experiment at a scale of me or a handful of friends, and I can only pretend to be a beginning student, and I can only pretend to be one that I think would act in a certain way that makes sense to me. But, when you unleash things at scale, I'm not sure if I'll go to a big enough scale because who knows how many, I'll deal with, between, 70 and 200 students a year or something, right? And then I don't imagine many more than that, maybe another 30 to 50 to 100, might read this book unless I get a broader circulation. But there is something interesting that happens at scale that I can't predict, but, new things. When you put something in front of 1,000 people, things happen, in that large number that you wouldn't see when you explore for yourself, so I'm sure there will be surprises and, hopefully they're not, terrible. But, there have been cases, I think, was it the University of Michigan who had a bot that they let out where suddenly they were, telling students, to kill themselves or whatever sort of weird way that bot went. I forget the details, but I hope that's not, I'm hoping that's not what happens. But with 1,000 students, who knows? And you try to figure out what went wrong. I mean, it is hard to figure out what to do in a world with rapidly changing technology that we don't, fully understand.
Do you feel like the administration in your department, in your university, is supportive of these sort of experiments of moving forward with AI?
I feel like in my department they are supportive and interested. We had a couple years ago we started to get regular, about once a semester, just checking in about what people have been doing for AI in teaching, and there's been all sorts of useful, interesting discussions that have come out of those meetings. And it feels like at our university there are some guidelines that they suggest, but it seems like often it's very much they seem willing to watch us all experiment and see what happens. So there are some guidelines about privacy and so on, but on the whole, they aren't coming from on high and telling us what to do one way or another.
I'm going to ask a question from the chat. So someone asked, I'm just curious what you think about AI humanizers. if you need to write a paper without being detected, you could use a humanizer. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, right? That's why I think that trying to fight these bots and try to catch students in the act seems like a losing proposition. You know, that might just, punish the students that aren't as sophisticated and going, in figuring out your defenses. So yeah, the humanizers are a thing, and like, yeah, for essay questions or for anything, that's totally totally there. So we got to figure out either how to have a social contract with the students, and help them understand that they need to learn stuff, or figure out um how to evaluate their understanding in class. So for example, I imagine many of you, I don't know if the audience was familiar with that question on that paper on your brain on AI. I think came out of an MIT group, right, where they had students. Do you guys know this study? So they had students write an essay over 4 sessions, and they had to do it a few different ways. But the most relevant way for this discussion is they had either the students have an AI write it first and do that kind of 3 times, work with AI to make it better in 3 sessions. And then in the 4th session, they would write it themselves, or it was the opposite one where they didn't have AI access over the first 3 sessions. And by the 4th session, then they had AI, they were given access to AI to make their paper better. And there were a whole bunch of interesting things that came out of that study. This is the one that, if you've seen the popular media, it was said that AI makes you dumber, which, isn't quite true or what they found, but they hooked it up to people's brains at the end and did whatever, some sort of looking at whatever neurobiologists do to brains, but to see how they're working. But right, what they found was that the students who wrote the paper first initially, those papers weren't as good, or at least weren't as good to start, but that they explored more creative ideas and were more diverse and more interesting. And they also found that those students, by the end, if you asked them a question about their paper, or had them quote it, had them say something about it, those students knew more about what they wrote. Kind of, if any of us have spent any time using these bots for real work or for cheating, you could have guessed these answers, right? So if you gave the student, said, hey, tell me something about your paper, here's 3 quotes, which one came from your paper, the students that wrote the paper themselves would know, and the people that didn't wouldn't. So some sort of way of evaluating students' understandings, or having students develop, engage in some metacognitive task after they write, to say, what did you learn, and have that be paper and pencil, I think would be pretty good, and would be a way around these humanizers to some extent. I mean, another way to do it would then the students would have the bot write it, and then they would study what the bot wrote, but that seems stupid. That seems like a lot of work. Why not just write it yourself by then? So I think that trying to do intense policing on the level of students giving you content seems to not be, it seems not good for anyone. It seems like then students feel policed.
Yeah.
And might try to put efforts into getting around that. Well, if instead you're saying, right, the reason why we assign essays isn't because they're fun to read, right? It's not because the students are going to develop some fantastic product, although occasionally they do, but the real reason why we assign essays is because that's how you learn. And so you say, here's a way we're going to give you, here's an opportunity to learn, and then we can evaluate your learning in some other format where these, or use that to then evaluate your learning in some other way, where this was a great opportunity for you to learn, seems to be what I would think would make sense.
So what about the essays for application to universities? Like, you're finishing high school, you want to apply to universities. Most universities ask you for essays, right? Nowadays, what's the point of it if you can chat GPT it? Basically.
Whatever was the point of it? I don't know. I mean, you guys are your college essay. I mean, I guess it's maybe to get a sense of who you are, and
But this
if that's the case, you can still write who you are, and students can still be evaluated on who they are, even if they had an AI help them write it or even compose it, right? Or different levels of things, right? If what the AI writes is bullshit and it doesn't line up with the student's CV or whatever other sort of context, that's fine. But it's meant to be a representation of who you are. And my guess is even if you have a bot write it, right, it might sound better, but you have to figure out how to evaluate it, not on the quality of that writing, but on the how does this work or look. And my sense is that students' essays won't stand out as being fantastic or even good if they all sound like AI slop, right? So I mean, one thing we know is you can't beat an AI, but if 1,000 students are using the same AI to write the same thing, that's not going to make them stand out. And I think that maybe to some extent that might be what those essays do, and so it might just be that we end up reading them differently or that we get rid of them. I mean, mine was stupid. I remember writing a college essay and I was like, this is dumb. I don't know.
But change your life, kind of. Like the decision is based on partly on your essays. So it is kind of like biased and important. And I'm wondering, like, what's the point of doing now that, knowing all what we know now with LLMs? So...
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I guess
Amanda,
the thing is like, I guess what's an LLM gonna do for you?
right.
If you
It's
say,
still an
here's my life
arbitration of
experience,
taste,
here's my
right?
CV, write this thing for me,
Right.
and then you do it. Okay, then it's put your. Yeah, I'm trying to think about. I guess I haven't read enough of them. I read them at the context of the graduate students who apply to my lab, right?
Same.
And what I want to know is, do they know what they're talking about, and does it seem to be coherent about why they're writing to me? And a chatbot could do that, I guess. I've been kind of surprised. So as a professor, I don't know if you guys get this, I get like spam, from different people that used to have my name in bold, and it would be from someone in some developing country telling me the reasons they want to work in my lab, and it never made any sense. And I still get those emails now, and they're better written, because presumably they've been through AI, but they, for some reason, still don't make more sense. So I don't know if that's just these people still being somewhat lazy or something, but right, you have to figure out why you're writing this email, why you're writing this college essay. What is it about the fit between you and what you want to do that makes it make sense? And I haven't seen people. I've been surprised that I haven't been getting better spam. I've been surprised I haven't been being scammed better.
I think that's interesting. A lot of what you guys, I haven't really been saying much, but a lot of what you guys have been talking about, sort of, if I'm going to be reductive about it, circles around the idea of like, everyone's always been able to cheat. You've always, the rich kid at school was always able to pay someone to like write their essay if they didn't want to do it. This is like bringing cheating to the people to a certain level, right? Like if you don't want to do this thing, but you want to turn in an essay that will get you points in a class, now it's just easier than it used to be. Now you don't have to pay. Yeah, now you don't have to pay some person and find the person. What you just go to a website, you pay the website, it'll do it for you. It'll do as much as you want if you pay the subscription. So like, I guess it feels like what the conversation sort of circling around is, if you want to learn, there are ways to assess if you have or have not learned in class. And like, I guess, is the personal responsibility argument valid in this case, where it's like, if a student doesn't want to learn, they're not going to learn. They're going to cheat. They're going to buy the answers. They're going to whatever. And if they want to learn, they're going to learn. And if they use AI, maybe they have trouble with English because that's not their first language or whatever. If they use the AI as a tool that helps them write a thing that's more coherent linguistically, because they had help, but it's their ideas, that seems better to me. Like, that seems like it is helping them. But I don't know. Does that, like, this is sort of the personal responsibility argument that gets thrown around in a lot of context. Does that degrade education? Does that degrade the institution if the answer is, I can't stop you from using AI, to effectively cheat. So you can get an A in my class and graduate, but you won't know anything about it because you actually didn't put in the effort and learn anything. I don't know. Is that a problem for anyone other than the students, or is that just kind of, is that okay? Is that acceptable?
I think half of what you said I'm fully on board with. Where maybe we should put it, but where I think it is just making cheating cheaper, you know, and more accessible. And maybe that's great. Like, why shouldn't the rich kids be able to cheat? But I do think that it's somewhat on us as faculty, as teachers, to provide some way of validating if they knew anything or not. So that's what I'm saying. So as somebody who's giving the students some credential of knowing stuff, I think that you have to figure out some way to get them on the hook for if they know what they're talking about. And lots of what I'm doing is trying to use these bots to help them know what they're talking about more quickly. But I think that also comes with with probably largely offline and analog ways to figure out if they do know what they're talking about. Because I do think that there is this personal responsibility argument, but there's also responsibility for the faculty and for the institution to say that this degree has some meaning,
Do you have tools to detect, like the university developed some tools, like for example, plagiarism? There is like tools to detect if you copied part of whatever. When you write your thesis, I'm thinking that I remember in my grad school, we did that. We had like a plagiarism, like algorithm can go through your thesis or something.
Yep.
Do you
I mean, those tools exist and they're dumb, right?
Yeah,
like they don't always work. They're ways to treat it. They get it right or wrong. As Bob said, there's like these challenges about like, okay, what if you're actually learning but using it to clean up your English or whatever, like, or you can just put it through a humanizing bot, as one of these as a commenter said. So they exist, and I don't think they're the right tool for the job, because I ultimately don't care if a student used AI. I care if they know what they're talking about. And I think you can not use AI and not know what you're talking about. You can, like if you think about those boxes, right? You can imagine all sorts of combinations, right? You can know what you're talking about, not use AI. You can know what you're talking about and use AI. You can not know what you're talking about and use AI, and you can not know what you're talking about and not use AI. And right, we want to figure out. I don't care if they're using AI or not, right? I want to know if they know what they're talking about. So, yeah.
And I guess you would see it on their work, on their actual work in the research, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts. It's hard because what's it called? Let's play another game just for. I'm having so much fun chatting, but for the past, I don't know how many years they've told us to have low stakes exams, to give students plenty of time to, maybe more synthetic work at home or whatever, take home tests or whatever you want that would help the students would help the students have time to synthesize their understanding for themselves. And what I found is all the things that I thought were pedagogically good, these sort of thinking questions that I've developed over the past, I don't know, 15 years or whatever, are the questions that AI is just the best at bullshitting their way through. So
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, it might mean that we do change how we're evaluating students, and maybe to some extent to the worse. And that, like, okay, I can imagine. Okay, a student gives the assignment is to write a paper on something, and now my evaluation isn't just the paper, but if the student can, clearly articulate what they did and why at their presentation on their own, and respond to comments, questions, etc., by me and their peers. And to part of me is like, okay, great. That like helps me understand if they know what they're doing. And I'm like, oh, but for the past, I don't know how many years, all these teaching people are telling me, that puts students on the spot or something, and maybe it doesn't, help evaluate if they know what they're talking about. It might just evaluate if they're, good on their feet or something. But it seems like test might just evaluate how good of a test taker you are and not how well you know the material or whatever. And to some extent that might just be how we're gonna have to evaluate students. And I don't know, it might just be that being able to, you're gonna be held, there's gonna be a higher standard for being able to explain yourself and what you've done, to be able to talk about what you've done. I mean, it's just so hard to figure out what's going to be valued. And I say this about students, but it's also about the workforce. Like, what are we going to be hiring for? What's going to be an important skill? Oh no, I'm screwed here. What's going to be valued by employers? And like, what are we going to want people to be able to do in their jobs? And I don't know if I have a good understanding of that yet. It feels like that it's always gonna require some high level human understanding to validate these things, and to see if we can trust them at some extent. But who knows when and how, how many eyes we need on that, and what that, future will look like. I don't quite know. But
So, would you say you're more optimistic or pessimistic about mixing AI and the tool AI becoming more available and easier to access to in student life, teaching in general, and research and academic? What would you say?
for teaching and research, I'm remarkably optimistic.
Okay.
For social development and humans in general, I'm much more concerned, in terms of job loss, in terms of interpersonal relationships. I think those are things I'm pretty concerned about, and I'm worried about how AI will, in these LLMs, will influence all that. I'm pretty bullish on the idea that if you have something that knows stuff well enough to help you, you'll be able to learn it better. Like that seems great. And so I don't know if I'm just too much worried about the now and helping students learn better, where I'm not focusing enough on like what's that all for, and where are they going with it, but I am really optimistic about our abilities to teach better, to teach more efficiently, more cheaply, in a world where we have these tools to teach. Yeah, as I said, I'm not sure about the rest of the world around it, but I'm pretty optimistic about these things and people's learning, and that hopefully we'll get to some sort of both sort of people, good teachers will figure things out, and society will figure things out about how to do a good job with this. But of course, figuring things out like that comes at a cost of experimentation and getting it wrong sometimes.
Amanda, do you have more questions?
Sure. Let's ask a fun one. Of
Yeah.
all of pop science, like cultural science, is there any scientist that you feel like you relate to? Like, if you had to say you were one scientist, what would you describe yourself as?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question. I'm not that pop sci. I will say that what's his name? Um, um, Jeff Goldblum did say that nature finds a way, which
Uh-huh.
which I think is consistent with my understanding of evolution and how evolution works. Um, so maybe, but yeah, I don't know. That's a great question, and I wish I could give you a greater answer.
I like that
No,
answer.
that's
That's
perfect answer. So you live in Minnesota, right? Hello?
Yeah, Minnesota.
Oh, and it's very cold there, and you work on plants. Has that ever been an issue?
Um, no. I mean, it's also warm here, so the greenhouses have to get hot and cold. I mean, it's kind of fun in that in the summer it does get hot, so that can be as much of an issue as keeping things
Mm.
cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the only issue is that it's made for fun research questions. So I have a little bit of a side project that's kind of come and gone at different times, but an interest in developing perennial cold hardy crops. And then it's interesting to know, can this plant survive the winter or whatever. Um, but yeah, no, I haven't had any mishaps in that sort of way.
That's good. Um, is there anything that, as people completely ignorant of the field, it would be interesting for normal people to know about? Like, is there a plant that breaks a lot of rules? Is there some weird genetic thing that is inexplainable? Do you have any fun facts, if you will?
Oh yeah, so many. So, one of the things that I find most exciting about evolution is the opportunities for both conflict and cooperation. And so lots of my research on plants is actually about their social interactions. So the thing that first fascinated me about one of the things that first fascinated me about evolution and plant development, and we actually have the same thing in mammals, is that there are some genes that are expressed differently in kids based on if you get them from the mom or your dad. Have you guys heard of this? These are called these imprinted genes. Um,
Yeah.
and they're super fascinating and super cool, right? And one of my early ideas in plants came out of this idea about why these genes might be differentially expressed based on if you get them from your mom or from your dad, and also why we see them in mammals and angiosperms, but not like in chickens and fish or whatever, right? And it turns out that these genes often involve resource extraction from the mom, so that the genes that you express when you get them from your dad tend to be extractive and make you bigger, and the genes you express when inherited from the mom tend to be less grabby and less takey. And it makes sense that you would find these things in plants and animals because, well, plants have this thing called an endosperm, right? Where they, the big bit of the juicy bit of a coconut, or the yummy uh kernel in the corn or whatever that is where they get their where kids get their nutritive their nutrition. And similarly, mammals have the placenta, right, where there's this ongoing interaction between the mom and the kid over resources. Well,
Mhm.
flies and chickens and whatever don't have those sorts of ongoing interactions. And so I thought it was super cool that you have this different expression of genes based on your the parent you got them from, and how that might relate to a conflict between the mom and the dad over how many resources they should give their kid. Because of course, the mom might have future kids from future dads, while that dad knows whatever those genes come from a specific dad with a specific sort of context. And one of my early ideas in plants, that I study these plants that self-fertilize, and if that's the case, you should have less opportunity for a fight between mom and dad over resource allocation, because the mom is the dad. And so I looked for evidence of that when you cross different plants, and found evidence consistent with the fact that how related a mom is to a dad in a plant changes the pattern of expression of these things. And similarly, often when you look at animals, like there's these two species where one mouse is more monogamous and one is more polygamous. And again, where you're more monogamous, there's less opportunity for conflict. You have more co-investment in the future of all your kids. That's like more in line. Well, if you're more polygamous,
That's really interesting.
you have less if you're polygamous, the dad has less investment in the mom's future kids because they're probably not his. And you similarly see these different levels of expression of these genes, these imprinted genes, in different patterns of expression, based on those sorts of mating structures. And similarly, although I haven't kept up with this research as well, but there's also imprinted genes in the brain that seem to have impacts on social interactions. So there are these Prader-Willi syndrome and Engelmann syndrome, are two human diseases that have to do with misregulation of of these imprinted genes. And there's a whole bunch of interesting behavioral effects of different of misregulation of these genes. And I don't know sort of where this theory is, because I don't fully follow human behavioral evolution theory or whatever, but there were some ideas about how this might have to do with various social dynamics, and if you're interacting with maternal or paternal relatives at different times of development, and so on and so forth. So I always found that to me was one of the things that made evolution really exciting, that these sort of stories you can think about kind of play out at the genic level in fun and interesting ways. So there's a whole bunch of cool interactions. Similarly, I've worked a lot on meiosis, which is also super interesting, because again, when you are taught meiosis in high school or whatever, you're taught that it's this process by which, this orderly process by which you split up the stuff you got from your mom and from your dad or whatever, which is fully, true, but maybe not orderly, in that there is opportunity for conflict there between your maternal and paternal genomes, to figure out which one is going to make it to your kid and which one isn't. And so there's all sorts of interesting genes that, you know, break Mendel's laws or whatever, in efforts to sabotage meiosis in their favor. And I find all those sorts of dynamics to be quite fun and interesting, and gave me a new appreciation for meiosis when you realize that it's not something you had to study in class, but like a resolution, a way that, you know, that organisms try to deal with the fact that at this time in their development, there's a real disagreement over which chromosome should make it onto the should be passed on, and that, you know, obviously each chromosome would prefer it to be themselves and not the alternative one. And so, you know, I studied in, I don't know if, corn has these really weird, funky looking chromosomes called knobs, where they kind of have a bunch of weird shit at part of their chromosome that functions just to grab on to the meiotic machinery more closely, so that they'll be the one, not the alternative chromosome, getting into the kids. And those sorts of violations of Mendel's rules I've always found to be super, super interesting, and done a bunch of work on those sorts of things.
So it's like kind of like the Real Housewives of corn and mice. Okay, not exactly, but you know, for chat, one for chat.
Yeah, awesome. Well, any other questions? It was super fun. Hopefully this was all right for everyone involved. I had a good time, at least. I appreciate that.
Yeah, this was fun. People who were watching chat a little more closely, are there any final questions?
Yeah, I read from the chat. There are some questions. Someone's asking, does talking to plants and playing them music actually help them grow?
I've heard yes, but I am not an expert. Also, sometimes just hitting them a little bit helps too.
Oh, so that's what I'm doing wrong. I kill plants almost
like
exclusively.
not really hard, but just a little bit of like something like a wind going through them.
And another question is, if humans very slowly started spending more and more time in water, would they develop gills? You say gills or gills?
Gills.
Gills.
Probably not. I don't know. Have whales or dolphins? Right. Right. Mammals are kind of stuck, but that might not be a viable path, and they figure out other ways to deal.
Well, unless we have any more questions in chat, we do always give guests an opportunity. Obviously, your book is out there, and you want people to take advantage of that if they're interested. But do you have anything that you would like to plug?
No,
could
yeah,
be your socials or whatever.
That's quite new. No, nothing to plug. Just yeah. Hopefully, in a couple weeks, some of these AI. I'm trying to get more of these AI features into my book, and I'd be really curious, as I said, to have more people experiment it and email me, and like as they come online and get a sense about what they like. But yeah, no, nothing to plug. Just a lot of curiosity about what we're gonna do in this coming world, and I'm on those different platforms or whatever. But yeah, no, just kind of curious to figure it all out, and exciting times to live.
I have a quick question. Do you know other people like you who are trying and experimenting with AI with other students? I'm trying to kind of sense if there is like a growing interest, or more like the professors are more like kind of on the defense kind of thing. So
yeah, my sense is it's all over the place. I was talking to a postdoc today whose wife is a high school teacher, and who's a high school English teacher, and is quite interested. Yeah, instead of being on the defense, seems to be quite interested to figure out how to use these things. I'm in various sort of Slack groups or email, whatever, community practice. And it seems like people are all over the place and that everyone is figuring out, we're all trying to figure out different things to different
Yeah.
different ways to make different things to make of the
Of
of
the
these
new
this reality.
the new technology. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's fair. Amanda, anything else you want to add?
No, thank you for coming. We very much appreciated your time, and thanks for actually playing. You really kicked our butts a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You're great at talking and playing Tetris at the same time. It's impressive.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate the time, and yeah, I enjoyed it, and excited to hear more and see what you guys are up to. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, chat.
Chat, per usual, we're going to raid over to the Real Good channel. So my stream is over, but we're keep talking on Real Good. So go over there. Okay. Bye. But see you on the other one.